Coast Soul, and Tim Roxborogh playing 50 years of all the best soul and R&B, James Brown. And it's the anniversary this week, October the 24th, 1962 was when James Brown recorded the Live at the Apollo album, which became a massive seller for him. And all these years later is still regarded as one of the greatest albums ever, live or otherwise. It's ranked that highly. In fact, Rolling Stone magazine just a couple of years ago ranked this as the 25th greatest album of all time. Which is interesting because it's before he had some of his most famous hit songs, but there was something about the intensity of the performance and the way the crowd, particularly the women in the crowd, whoop in excitement at James Brown's performance, which makes it still stand up to this day. All right, coming up soon, we've got a band who were around in that era, in the early 60s, but they had their biggest hits in the 70s. In fact, they had nearly 20 hits until they had their first number one. That particular band in a few minutes' time, here on Coast Soul. This is Coast Soul, the show that plays all the best soul and R&B. It's every Sunday night on Coast between 6 and 8 p.m. And you can listen through iHeartRadio. Just search for the word soul. Get the app, which only takes a few seconds. Search for the word soul, and you can listen online too. Coming up shortly, we've got Aaron Neville remaking a 60s soul classic. First, though, I want to play you the most famous song by Gladys Knight and the Pips. And as I mentioned not long ago, that they'd had nearly 20 top 40 hits in the States until they had their first number one, which was This Week in History back in 1973, with a song that was originally called Something Else. Have a listen to the original of the song you're about to hear.
And she's leaving on the midnight plane to Houston, going back to a simpler place and time.
And Gladys Knight loved the songs of Jim Weatherly, and she actually asked him if he could do a little rewrite, saying that she didn't really go to Houston much and she preferred catching trains. And so he rewrote the song for Gladys Knight and the Pips, and they went to number one. Here they are. You're listening to Coast Soul. My name is Tim Roxborogh, and we're playing 50 years of the best soul and R&B. Aaron Neville there with Everybody Plays the Fool. And when he became a big star in the late 80s, early 90s, he'd actually already had about 30 years of making music behind him and hadn't had a great deal of success outside of New Orleans. But go back and discover some of the early Aaron Neville stuff, like this song here. Have a listen.
Check out your own backyard before you check out someone else. Railroad track.
A song called Hercules, such a cool song. And it was Linda Ronstadt who at one point in the late 80s said, this is ridiculous, Aaron Neville's got one of the greatest voices, he should be a superstar. And so she got him to do a couple of duets with her, and the Grammys arrived and the mainstream success with it too. Stay listening, we've got a Stevie Wonder song, and it's from his Talking Book album. That's coming up shortly here on Coast Soul.
The Air New Zealand Wine Awards, the premier wine.
If you love Marvin Gaye, Michael Jackson, and anything Motown, get it here. Coast Soul.
Soul.
This is Coast Soul, and Tim Roxborogh playing all the best soul and R&B of the past 50 years. Thank you for listening, either on Coast or through iHeartRadio. Just search for the word soul, and you can listen online anytime you like. Coming up, we've got a song which was a really big hit around the world, including New Zealand. But for whatever reason, it wasn't just a slightly big hit in New Zealand. It became one of the 5 biggest hits of 1981. That song shortly. I want to play you a Stevie Wonder song first. And one of the weird things about the song, which became a massive hit from the Talking Book album, have a listen to the first line of the song. And if you've ever thought, that doesn't really sound like Stevie Wonder,
That's why I'll always be around.
well, you would be right. It's not Stevie Wonder. In fact, it's one of his background vocalists, nor is this Stevie Wonder. So Jim Gilstrap sang the first couple of lines, and then Lonnie Groves, another backing singer of Stevie's, sings this line. So the first couple of lines in the song are not by Stevie Wonder until he comes in here, which was very generous of him, and a song that went to number one in 1972. Here it is. It's It's Coast Soul and Tim Roxborogh playing 50 years of the best soul and R&B. Champagne with How About Us, which was a hit for them from 1981. And while it was big in the US and the UK, for whatever reason, it was really big in New Zealand. Peaked at number 2 on the charts and became one of the top 5 biggest hits of the entire year of 1981 in New Zealand. Coming up soon, we've got a Billy Ocean song, and I just want to play you a little intro of the Four Tops one first. Have a listen to this and tattoo this in your mind. This famous intro to the Four Tops, I Can't Help Myself. Well, Billy Ocean sort of seemingly copied it, whether intentionally or unintentionally, or was just sort of going for that same feel for a song of his from 1978. That's coming up soon on Coast Soul. This is Coast Soul. It's the show for you if you love soul and R&B of any era. And coming up soon, we've got a Diana Ross song from the mid-80s. It was written by the Bee Gees, and it became her biggest solo hit in the UK that she ever had. That one is for you shortly. Billy Ocean first, though, and it's a song which I always wondered whether it was inspired by the Four Tops. Few seconds of this intro. Have a listen to this. So this is one of their most famous songs from the mid-60s, and Sugar Pie, Honey Bunch, I Can't Help Myself. So that intro there. And then, about a dozen years later, Billy Ocean with this song. It's pretty similar, isn't it? It's a great groove, but it's so similar that I wonder, was that intentional? Was it by mistake? Were the Four Tops and the Motown songwriters, Holland Dozier Holland, were they ever annoyed? Who knows? Regardless, both songs are great, and here's Billy Ocean with Love Really Hurts Without You on Coast Soul.
Stevie Wonder, Justin Timberlake, and everything in between. Coast Soul.
It's Coast Soul and Tim Roxborogh here as we play the best soul and R&B of the past 50 years. Diana Ross with the Bee Gees and Chain Reaction. That was her biggest ever solo hit in the UK, a number 1 hit from right at the start of 1986. And Barry Gibb of the Bee Gees is still going. He just turned 70 the other day. I'm sure you've heard that he's coming to New Zealand next year in April, and his new album, In the Now, is getting great reviews. By the way, if you'd never noticed the Bee Gees on that song, have a listen to this part in particular. Pretty distinctive background vocals. And in this day and age, songs always get credited to the person who's helping out on the song. So that would be called Diana Ross featuring the Bee Gees, whereas back in the 80s, it just went to the main performer. So it just got credited as being Diana Ross. Great song. All right, very soon we have somebody who was a rival for Diana Ross, particularly in the late 70s on the disco, R&B and pop charts. And it's one of the few number 1 hits to feature a sports whistle as an instrument. Stay listening for it here on Coast Soul.
At Coast, you might have noticed.
You're listening to Coast Soul and Tim Roxborogh here. Hope you're enjoying the songs. It's the best R&B and soul music of the past 50 years that we play. And you can listen to it on Coast every Sunday night between 6 and 8 and through the week on iHeartRadio as well. And if you've never listened to iHeartRadio and it's sort of technically a little bit imposing, it really takes just a few seconds to download and then create an account, which is typing in your email address and a password, search for the word soul or coast, and you will find us online as well. Going to play you a Donna Summer song now, and one of my favorite little fun facts about this particular song is it's one of the very few number 1 hits in history, possibly the only one. It's a little bit hard to verify, unfortunately. That features a sports whistle, like a referee's whistle, as an instrument. It's a great song and one of the finest acts of the 70s and 80s in my mind. Absolutely no question about it. Enjoy it. Donna Summer with Bad Girls here on Coast Soul.